In 2022, a new directing duo takes over the duties of the Scream franchise in Scream 5, or just plainly titled Scream. This legacy sequel is directed by Tyler Gillett and Matt Bettinelli-Olpin. It also, of course, stars Jenna Ortega, Melissa Barrera, David Arquette, and Jack Quaid. This fifth installment of the Scream franchise takes place 25 years after the events of Woodsboro, in which a new Ghostface attacks teens attached to the dark legacy of this small town. So we're going to dive into Scream 5 and help you decide whether or not it's the right one to watch as a Christian right now. Hey friends, welcome to the channel. I'm your host Tim, and we exist to help Christians live in the world, not of the world, by utilizing our convictions in the movies and shows we watch. Scream 5 is rated R for some strong bloody violence and language throughout, as well as a few sexual references. So we're going to dive into any convictions you may have that may prevent you from watching this installment of the Scream franchise, any theological themes present within it, and wrap it up with my own personal thoughts on the film. Without further ado, let's dive into the Christian Conviction Meter. If you're brand new here, the Christian Conviction Meter is 5 convictions that may distract or hinder your relationship with Jesus. Ultimately, this is a resource to help you figure out whether or not Scream 5 aligns with the convictions that God has given you. And to kick things off, this film continues the darker tone that was established within the 4th installment of the Scream franchise. It continues into this one, particularly in its violence. It's a much darker, grittier, more violent film. I wouldn't say the violence and gore is as strong as the 4th one. I still think that one is the most bloodiest of the franchise, but this one does not hold back in any way, shape, or form. There's a lot of brutal violence contained with this one. Lots of stabbings that we do see throughout. There's one scene in which a character is stabbed in his stomach and in his back, and it almost feels like he's kind of ripped up from the top. It's pretty disturbing, I will say that. There is also, once again, a lot of overkill. In the first beginning part of the movie, we see a girl attacked and she is stabbed 7 times. She breaks a leg. There's a lot of just attacks that honestly kind of feel like a sense of torture. This particular iteration of Ghostface feels like he's spending more time with his victims and really just taking advantage of that, which honestly is borderline psychotic behavior. Not borderline, it's full-on psychotic behavior. But all of that to say, it is very, very dark, and it can be and is very disturbing in a lot of ways, particularly with just the way this Ghostface operates in a much darker kind of tone. I also do want to mention, before I forget though, there's a character in which she is lit up on fire and is kind of burned. Of course, there is some gunfire, and there is, like I mentioned, just lots of blood throughout this entire movie. And of course, there is also just a lot of death. There is a lot of killings. Not as many as the 4th one, which had about 7 or 8. This one is a little bit less, but it's still more than the average Scream film. This one has about 5, if I remember correctly. But they do take out a lot of people. There is more injuries in this one than there is in any of the previous Scream films. But still, the way this Ghostface operates is definitely on a much different level and caliber, especially compared to the original trilogy of films. There also are a few deaths here that are pretty sad and disturbing, so that is something to keep in mind. But we'll talk about more of that when we get into our last category. Just like the last 4 Scream films, this one is for sure going to be a 5 out of 5 in this category. It is very violent, and it does not stop throughout this entire film. Whether it is by Ghostface or people trying to attack Ghostface, there is a lot here. Our next category is lust, and there are a few different scenes throughout this entire film in which there are a few just kind of sexual references, innuendos, things of that sort. A bit on par with the rest of the franchise for the most part, as it is dealing with high schoolers and teenagers. Again, I don't know why this is a trend. Not a fan of it. Let's continue on here. There are a couple scenes in which some characters are passionately kissing, whether it's on a couch or something else. One scene, it's with a guy and a girl. Another scene, it's with two girls. So that is something to keep in mind here. But that's the most kind of LGBTQ plus sort of references contained within the film. It's just that. There's a little bit more within the sixth one when we get to that in our next review. But as of right now, that is what is contained within the film. At the same time, too, there is your classic taking the shower sort of thing, but instead of a girl, this time it is a guy. There's a towel wrapped around his waist, but that is about it in terms of this category. So all of that kind of put together, we're going to give this a 3 out of 5. There is a good chunk here. Our next category is substances, and just like several of the other films we've seen, we once again have a high school party in which alcohol is present within the party scene. And so there are beers, there are of course a lot of hard liquor. I believe there's even a punch contained within this, but that is something to kind of keep in mind here. This is something the characters do. There isn't any explicit drunkenness on scene, which is nice, but one of the characters we do have talks about being high on painkillers in a hospital scene as well, so that is something to keep in mind. There also is a character in which his house is kind of in shambles. We do see a lot of just different bottles or empty cans throughout his space and where he lives. So that is something to keep in mind. All of that to say, we are going to give this category a 3 out of 5 in this one. Our next category is profanity, and hell is used, the DA word is used, the SH and BI words as well as the A words are all used within this film. There's a good chance there are multiple other uses of language throughout this entire film. There also is a few OMGs and Jesuses that are contained within this, obviously not in a praise and worship sense, but more in a reactionary sense for those. But just like all the other Scream franchise films, there is multiple uses of the F word contained within this movie. And because of that, it is going to be a 5 out of 5 in this category. And our last category is intense/horror scenes. This is a horror movie, which means you're going to have the classic horror elements of more tensed up moments, jump scares, a nervous tension throughout to put you on the edge of your seat is all contained throughout this film. Like I mentioned at the top here, this does contain the darker tone that was set within the fourth Scream film, so that is something to keep in mind. It's not as lighthearted as the original 3, so that is something to keep in mind. This also is one of the more brutal, more intense films of the franchise as well. There's lots of death, lots of screaming, lots of chase sequences that are contained within this film. And there is, of course, lots of stabbing. That is the method in which Ghostface uses to attack his victims. And like I mentioned earlier, there is a lot of overkill that is a part of it. And there also is as well just a lot of moments of almost torture-like trying to take out the victim. Like I said at the beginning of the film, it is arguably the most intense opening of any of the Scream films since the first one, in which a character is openly attacked and is stabbed multiple times. It is dark, it is disturbing. The way it's portrayed on screen is very, very real. And so that is something to kind of keep in mind here. Like I said, it does contain the same tone. I would argue that this is, if not the most brutal and intense of the franchise. I wouldn't say it is the goriest, but in terms of brutality, this is definitely up there in terms of the 5 we've seen thus far. And so, once again, this is going to be a 5 out of 5 in this category. So our grand total on the conviction meter is going to be a 21 out of 25. It is very high in its violence and gore, its profanity, its intense/horror scenes. So all of that to say, if any of the areas we talked about compromises your convictions in any way, shape, or form, don't worry about watching this 5th installment of the Scream franchise. Your convictions are more important than any movie or show you watch, so make sure to keep those convictions a priority as they are God-given. Allow Him to continue to spur you on towards Christ-likeness. That leads us beautifully into our next topic as we dive into some theological themes that are present within Scream 5. And just like the last few installments of this franchise, there really isn't anything explicitly here in terms of Christianity, the Bible, the church, Jesus. None of that is really within this film. But we do get, of course, the overall kind of general theme at least Christian theme within the Scream franchise, which is just, we live in a broken and fallen world. Ever since Genesis chapter 3, in which Adam and Eve, of course, were in the garden and ate the fruit in which God told them not to, sin entered into our world, causing us to just live in a broken and fallen state. And so many of the things we see within Scream are a result of sin, are a result of the brokenness that the world is part of, the world is in. And so that is something to kind of keep in mind when watching this film. But again, nothing explicitly Christian, Jesus, Bible, or church related in this film. That brings us into our last category as we dive into what I think of Scream 5. This film is a interesting one because it does have a lot of the same tropes that we do see within this classic franchise. It calls itself a requel, which is a reboot sequel, and we've seen a lot of those, as particularly post 2014, so to speak. Although I would argue that it does suffer from some of the, I would argue, crappier trends of the legacy sequels, things that necessarily don't feel all that great, or decisions made about certain characters that I personally disagree with or I'm not a fan of, but are part of the legacy sequel tropes. And in case you're unaware of how a reboot, sequel, a requel kind of works, is you have a combination of the legacy characters and you bring in, of course, all these new characters together. Most of the characters we do see in this one are connected to legacy characters in some way, shape, or form. Not necessarily the ones within the film, but just ones around the franchise, which does add a bit of familiarity to it. In some ways, I think it's kind of cool. There are some decisions, though, with specific characters and who they're related to, I'm not crazy about, because it's like, it doesn't fit. In my personal opinion, it doesn't fit. Although the way they do those things within this one, I think, are quite good, though. So it's kind of weird. There's things I like about the choices made. There's also things I don't. And continuing on with that, many of our new characters are pretty solid. Of course, Jenna Ortega has been in a lot of different things, and a lot of that is because of these two films in particular. She's really great in this. I think she does a really good job. And then, of course, Melissa Barrera, also really solid as well. Her character in particular has a few revelations about her character that I'm not super crazy about, as I kind of alluded to. There's things I like, there's things I don't. It's probably the best way to honestly describe this film, if I'm being honest. There's things I do enjoy about this one. Some of the twists and turns are pretty decent, although my biggest issue with this film by far is the fact that I did see the villain twist coming. When it is ultimately revealed who this iteration of Ghostface is, I wish it was a little bit different. Does it mean I disagree with the decision? No, it made sense, just given the story and all the stuff surrounding it. I'm still not crazy about it, though. I wish it was a little more ambiguous rather than just kind of straightforward. Overall, it's a decent film. It's by no means one of the best of the franchise. It's kind of in that mediocre middle for me. There's things I do enjoy about this film. A lot of the characters here are solid. The story overall is quite enjoyable. And I like seeing our legacy characters again. That's always fun. But there is also a lot of flaws. I think the lack of keeping the villain ambiguous, I thought, was a bit disappointing. I wish that the decisions, the legacy sequel tropes that we've seen throughout a lot of the legacy sequels, particularly Star Wars in that regard, I wish they didn't do that here. So overall, I'm giving it a 6.7 out of 10. Now, before you say anything, no, I'm not referencing those numbers. It's just the rating I am giving it. It's pretty good. I wouldn't say it's obviously not the best of the franchise. That's still number one. But it's decent. It's not great. Will I go back and revisit this film anytime soon? Probably not. But, of course, in leading up to the seventh one, we do have to talk about this one. So, those are my thoughts on the film. So let me know yours down in the comments below. Let's chat all things about the fifth installment of the Scream franchise in the comments. And while you're down there, consider hitting that like and subscribing for us, joining our community here on YouTube, It just helps to send us out into that algorithm, allows us to reach more Christians to help them utilize their convictions in the movies and shows they watch. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to spend time with us here. We truly appreciate it. It means the absolute world to us. Before you go and you're interested in hearing my thoughts on Scream 4, that video is available for you right over here. There is also a surprise YouTube choice pick based on what you like, and hopefully they did a good job in picking another review here for you that we have here on the channel, and we'll see you all in the next one.